Hi, guys. Welcome to the Heart to Heart show here with Uma and Mr. 6'6". Six is trying to get into the studio right now, so we will give it a minute before we start. I am the CEO of the Lotus and Light Metaphysical Center, where I do spiritual, holistic, and psychic work. And one of the things that I do, one of the titles that I wear is I am an evidential medium. I communicate with people from the beyond. And it's a very fascinating thing. So last week at our show, someone asked me, Uma, would you do a show about life in the beyond and crossing over and near-death experiences? And I said, of course, because that's my forte. So welcome in. We are talking about near-death experiences and what to expect in the beyond. There is a process. You know, I took a class one time in college. It was called Death, Dying, and the Beyond. And I have to tell you guys, there is a process of crossing over. Did you guys know that? Anyone? Oh, speaking of which, I'm supposed to be recording this as well. Hold on one second. All right, I have to repeat that all over again. Here we go. Welcome in, everyone. This is the Heart to Heart show with Uma and Mr. 6'6". We are here every Thursday night at 9 p.m. talking about matters that are close to the heart. I am the CEO of the Lotus and Light Metaphysical Center, and tonight's topic is a near and dear one to me. We are talking about echoes from the beyond, echoes from the afterlife, and near-death experiences. So this topic is close to my heart because I have worked with people from the beyond as an evidential medium. I have worked with people getting ready to cross over to the beyond as a transitional healer. And I've worked with family members of those who survived the people that went to the other side. I have so many stories, and we were supposed to have a guest here tonight to share their near-death experience, but unfortunately they weren't able to make it. But don't worry, I have my own stories to share as well. So if you are watching us live on YouTube or on Meet Me, welcome in. Thank you so much for being here. And I can't wait to see what your questions are or what your comments are as we talk about this topic about crossing over. One of the major things that I like to note is that crossing over to the other side is something that we're all going to do. Hi, BH. And it's so surprising to me that people don't pay more attention to it. It's almost like, you know, kind of like buying a coffin, right? Nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants to pay attention to that. But at the end of the day, it's something that we have to do because we're all going to end up there at some point. And this is one of the things that I like about talking about this topic. It applies to everyone. In the world today, oh, hi, BN. In the world today, there's so many differences, so many things that separate us from each other to make us feel like we don't understand each other or we can't relate to each other. But two things we can relate to: being born and passing away, because we all go through it. There is yet a person here today that can say, I've transcended birth or death, right? So I'm here really as an open conversation for those of you that have questions. If you have questions, you want to air them now is the time. If not, I'll just talk about some things that I've noticed as an evidential medium and as a transitional healer. One of the things I noticed is that people tend to do a lot of reflecting right before it's their time to go. I had sat with a man one time. His granddaughter called me in to lay hands on him, provide energy healing to him. And we didn't know, hi Grace, how the session was going to go. He was in hospice. And we know that when you go to hospice, that's because you're getting ready to transition. And his granddaughter loved him very much. And he was in a lot of pain due to his medical condition. And she wanted me to be there as a healer. Little did we realize that I would also be there as a medium. So I show up to this beautiful hospice center and I walk in and he is as bright and cheery as can be. We made acquaintances. I sat down with him. We had a little chat. I explained to him what I was going to do. He didn't know anything about it, but he was intrigued and he was interested. He really wanted to meet me because he heard about me from his granddaughter and he decided to buy my book. And after reading my book, that's great. He said that he wanted to meet me in person. So I showed up there and I was booked to do a healing session. And I did the healing session, but through the healing session, I have this way of making my clients feel very, very comfortable and relaxed. And during the healing session, we started to have a chat and started to talk. And in the conversation, this is where I realized that people that are getting ready to cross over start doing a lot of reflecting. He started talking a lot about his first wife. And I remember this shocked his granddaughter because she was not his only wife. In fact, this gentleman, I know he was married a second time, but I believe he was also married a third time. And she was so surprised because all of his wives had crossed over. She was so surprised that in talking to me, he started to remember this first wife. I wasn't surprised at all because you see me as the healer while doing the Reiki and the energy healing on him. The medium in me was very aware that his first wife was there wanting to communicate with him. And I facilitated this really beautiful conversation that things that needed to be said between his first wife and himself. He was so emotional that he cried throughout the session in recollecting what he did and how everything went down. And he even apologized to her for the ways he hurt her. And he said, even though I moved on, she was really the one for me. I just wasn't grown enough to be the man for her. It was a very healing time. And the granddaughter wanted to know, why would the first wife come through and not the latter two wives? And in that situation, I said, because this was the soulmate relationship. And the wife knew that she was going to be leaving before him. So she wanted to make sure that he was set up with someone who could love him when she left. And also, the love is strong. And when it is his time to pass over, she's definitely going to be there to collect him. And that brought him a lot of joy. And it was funny because in the conversation, I never told him that I was communicating with his wife. I was just mentioning things and, steering the conversation based on how she wanted me to steer the conversation. And I didn't want to tell him I was communicating with her because I didn't know his belief system about that, if he believed in the afterlife or believed in people communicating with spirits. And I didn't want to upset him because he is in the hospice center. So I never said anything to him about communicating with this first wife. But throughout the conversation, he said to me, I know you're going to think this is strange, Uma, but something about you being here is making me feel all sorts of things. And I really feel like she's here talking to me. And that's when I said, yeah, she is. And she's using me as a channel. She's using my energy, my vibration to communicate with you. And that's why you can hear her. And that's why you can see her. And that's what kind of shook him, because he didn't know that I knew he could see her. But I knew he could see her because I was seeing her, right? This is just the beautiful thing about spirit communication, is that it's so complex and technical, but yet so simple to do. I am a trained medium, but before becoming a trained medium, I was a medium without training. And how I did it was very, very simple. I just opened my heart and wanted to be of service. So tonight we're talking about crossing over, death, dying, and beyond, and the afterlife. Welcome to the Heart to Heart Show. So we have a question from VH on YouTube. Do you know about how long it takes once passed that we realize we are out of body and just our soul being? That's a very tricky question, because most times if you are a very self-aware person, you will know very quickly that you have crossed over and you've transitioned. And the reason for that is because when you do finally cross over, you are met by somebody on the other side. No soul is left by themselves. All right? You have somebody that comes to you to collect you. And it's somebody that you love and somebody that has already been on the other side. So this can be a grandmother, a parent, a sibling, a relative, a friend, a coworker, an employee, an employer that you were very close to. It has to be somebody that you were very close to. And upon seeing them, you will have the awareness, I'm not living anymore. You understand? I'm not living anymore. I'm on the other side. And also too, there's a portal of white light that opens up. So when the person comes to collect you, you're going to see the portal, and everything in you is going to want to walk through that portal because it's not scary. I know Hollywood has made this out to be a very scary time, with horror and monsters and things like that. But it's not. It's a very beautiful time because it's coming home. Think about this for a second. Have you guys ever been on vacation? Have you ever been on a trip where you had a great time? You went to a new place. Let's say you went to Europe and you traveled and you ate the food and you took the pictures and you heard the languages and you had fun. Most of us, when we're done with the trip and we're coming home, we're excited to come home, are we not? Because you miss things from home. You miss your home. You miss your bed. You miss your routine. You miss your food. You miss your way of being. And that's what it's like when you cross over on the other side. You don't regret it. You don't wish you could have stayed longer. It's that perfect vacation, that perfect trip that you had, and you spent enough time there to the point where you were just ready to come home. And if you pay attention to older people, you'll notice that with them. How many of you have had older relatives that were getting ready to transition? How many of them have actually said to you, I'm ready to go home. I'm tired of being here, right? It's the equivalent of when you're on a vacation, on an extended vacation, and you have had all the fun and you've done all the things, and you're just ready to go to sleep and take a nice long sleep and wake up refreshed, right? That's what the feeling is like. So there's no fear there. There's no scare there. It's a very gentle, easy process. So once you do cross over onto the other side, you will know. You will know pretty quickly that you're on the other side. Now, the process of dying itself has actually been documented. I remember when I was training to become an evidential medium, they had a woman who gave a talk in one of my classes, and she was a hospice nurse. And she had shared with us what that whole process was like. And I can't remember all the parts. So if anybody's watching this on the replay and this is your actual line of work, I apologize if I butcher it. All right. But I will try my best to remember what she said, because it was very beautiful what she said. So she said, first of all, when somebody is getting ready to pass, it's like they're going to have a freeze in the body. They're going to get very, very, very cold. And that's how you know the soul is ready to take off, to lift out of the body, because it becomes very, very cold. It's almost like it's detaching from the body. And you know that because people who are getting ready to pass, they'll start saying, I feel cold, right? Another thing is they'll be in and out of sleep because they're getting ready to prepare themselves for moving to the next side. So they have to kind of disconnect from the consciousness of this planet and the earth realm and start re-engaging back into the consciousness on the beyond. It's very similar to what mediums do. When we do readings, when we tune in and tap in to talk to loved ones, we have to disconnect from this plane and connect to the other plane. That's why a lot of times when you see a medium doing a reading, you would see them look off to the top left corner of, their eyesight, or the top right, and they have like a faraway look in their eyes. They're disconnecting from here and they're connecting over there. Now, once that chill comes in, it's about 24 to 48 hours till they're finally out of the body. As this person described it to me, it starts from the feet and it starts to travel up the body. But it takes a while. It's not all happening within an hour. We're talking 24 to 48 hours of this cold traveling from their feet, coming up their ankles, coming up their knees, coming up their legs, coming up their body, right? And then it reaches their heart. Now, when the cold reaches the heart chakra, what happens is they're going to have that burst of psychic energy, because the heart chakra holds a lot of psychic energy. And when it has that burst of psychic energy, what's going to happen is they're going to start to see into the other side, right? Now, this is important because for people who do not know about the other side, who don't believe in psychics, who don't believe in mediums, who don't believe in the mumbo jumbo ghost stories, this can be a shock for them. So sometimes when people are crossing over, when they have that burst in the heart area, they can start to feel panicked or scared. Have you guys ever seen that? A loved one passing over and they just get very scared, very frightened. They might start screaming or crying. They might be looking at a corner of the room in fear. And that's what gives people the feeling like crossing over is a terrible thing, or crossing over is there's bad things or bad people on the other side. It's not necessarily that. More than likely, it's because they haven't really been open to any of this while they were living, and it comes as a shock. They actually start to see what I see as a psychic and as a medium. They start to see colors. They start to see shapes. They start to see people from the other side. Have you guys ever seen that with somebody crossing over? They tell you things like, Mom was just here. I see Dad. There's Billy. And you're sitting there like, they're going crazy because all these people are on the other side. They're right there in the room to comfort the person, to welcome them home, and to help them adjust to leaving the earth plane and moving back over to the other side. You see, the one thing you guys need to know is that the death and dying process is filled with a lot of love. It's a loving process. It's a compassionate process. Do not let people make you feel fearful about dying. Do not let people make you feel fearful about the other side. There's way more love over there than there is here in the world today. Because there are no wars, there is no scarcity, there is no fighting. It's just love. So now this death cold, right, has hit the heart area, and that's when we hear the breathing changes in the person crossing over. And that breathing becomes like what we call the death rattle. Have you guys heard it or heard that term before? The death rattle? And that's what that is because now the cold that started from the feet moving up the body has hit the chest. And once it hits the chest, it has about another 10 to 12 hours before the soul is out of there. And nurses will tell you that. Hospice nurses that work with the clients, once they hear that patient breathing in a certain way, they're going to know, okay, this person is getting ready to exit out. Now, that death cold, that chill is going to move upwards into the throat, into the face, and into the third eye. And when it hits the third eye, that's when we have another burst of that psychic energy. And that's when the communication with the other side becomes even clearer. So before, where they were having like little snippets, now they're having full on visuals and pictures and seeing people, like real people, sit with them and have full conversations with them. And this is where we start to lose them on this side, because now they're more fully immersed on that side. In fact, they're ready to go. The fear has left, the panic has left, the anxiety has left, and now they're excited, right? This is when we say that they're hallucinating on this side. Oh, they're hallucinating. They're talking to people that aren't here anymore, you know, and then they're ignoring us, right? We're coming in trying to feed them or give them a blanket, and they don't even want to know anything about that. They're just so concerned with what's going on the other side. And then after that, the final bits of it, the cold, goes up through the head, through the crown chakra, and that is where the soul leaves, through the crown. Do you know why the soul leaves through the crown? Any guesses? I'll tell you why. That is where we come in from. Have you ever noticed on babies that there's that soft spot called the fontanelle on the top of the head? It's the last place to form solidly. That's because that's where the soul enters in. So depending on who you talk to, everybody has a difference of opinion when it comes to talking about how the soul comes in the body. There's some theories that the soul, the minute you are, the minute you have a embryo formed, a zygote formed in the woman's uterus, that the soul is there. Then there's others who believe the soul comes in 3 to 6 months later. I belong to the group of people or the community that believes the soul comes in at the time of delivery. And the reason why I believe that part is because it makes more sense to me. Me as a soul, why would I want to be trapped in a woman's body? It's kind of like going to the car wash and or getting your car detailed and you sitting in your car waiting for it to be done, right? Why? When you can just sit outside and wait until it's done and then just pop on in and go for the ride. So I tend to subscribe to the group of the community that believes when the baby is born, the soul comes in at that time. And that is why we have a soft spot on the top of the head, the fontanelle. So just as we come in through the fontanelle, we also leave through the fontanelle, right? And for people who actually work with patients that are dying, hospice nurses, hospice workers, some of them have actually said that they see a white smoke leave out the top of the head of the person who's dying at the same time the doctor calls the time of death. I had a friend who worked in hospice, and she had to be in the room when the person was dying, and she said it all the time. I would see this white smoke come out the top of their head. I thought that was interesting. So that's the process of dying. I had like a really interesting situation with my own grandmother because she passed on the other side. And it's funny how we can be so connected to each other, even if we're not connected in the earth plane. And I say that because I love my grandmother, my mother's mother. I've always loved my grandmother, but we did not have a strong physical relationship. It was just a strong emotional, spiritual relationship. I lived for a piece of time with her when I was in college. And when I was living with her, I just was moved by the kind of woman that she was. I used to every night look forward to her stories. And the stories she would tell me would be about her life and all the things that she lived through. And she was a healer and she was a herbalist. She was always in the kitchen making up some herbal remedies. And I would watch her and I would learn from her. In fact, I would go so far as to say my grandmother is the reason I am the healer and the medium I am today, because all of her stories inspired me as a child. And she was my source of inspiration, if you will. But she was a hard woman and not very open to having actual intimate relationships with people. So she kept me at a distance, as she did many, many people. Thank you, VH. Thank you, BN. And I remember I was living in my house and I had a dream one night that my grandmother died in the house of my mom, who lived in Florida. And I remember seeing her in the bed and thinking, I need to see her because she's getting ready to pass. And when I woke up, the feeling was so strong in me that I called my mom, because my grandmother lived in Jersey, but she was visiting my mom. And my mom was really trying to convince her to move in with her because we all knew she was getting ready to go because she had cancer and she was very sick. And she was also having like little bits of dementia coming in. And my mom was concerned for her health and wanted her to move in with her. So she convinced my grandmother to take a trip down there to visit. And I remember asking my mom, how's Nan doing? And she said, she's good. She's fine, and I something was like, no. So I said, I'm going to come visit. She said, okay. And I flew down there. It was like a Friday to a Monday. It wasn't a long trip. I just felt I had to come and say goodbye to my grandmother. And when I was down there, she was very happy to see me. We spent time together. And then her body was very much in pain. So when she showered at night, I would ask her if I could rub her because I'm a massage therapist. And even though this woman is very like, no, 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 don't bother, I'm good, she allowed me to. And she used to be very fretful during the day, but at night she would get very quiet like a child. And I would just rub her arms and her legs with some oil, and she would sleep, and have like good sleep. And I remember one night after I'd given her her oil massage and she went and lay down, I went to my room and I went to bed. And I'll never forget this. It was like at 1:11 in the morning, because I remember I checked the clock and I remember seeing it was a number. It was either like 333 or 111, but I think it was 111 in the morning. And my bedroom door had opened and my grandmother was standing there. And I was frightened because I was woken up in the middle of the night. I was like, Nan, are you okay? What's going on? And she said to me, she was in a state, and she said to me, I'm fine. I just wanted to tell you bye because I'm going home. And I knew immediately what she meant. And I said, no. So I brought her into my bed and she lay down and she just said, Lex, I just want to go home. And I said, I know. And I said, and you will. You'll go home soon enough. I said, but right now you're tired. So just take a nap. And she said, okay. And she fell asleep in my bed. And I stayed up watching her because I was so terrified that she was going to pass in the middle of the night. I stayed up so long watching her that eventually I fell asleep and was woken up by my mother. It was bright outside. And my mother was confused because when she woke up, she went to check on her mother and she wasn't there. She was in my room. And she was so confused. And I had to explain to her what happened. So I knew that was my Nan's way of saying she's leaving. So that day I had my talk with her. I told her all the things I ever wanted to say to her. I thanked her and I told her what I planned to do with my life. And I was just really talking because I was aware that not all of her was here anymore. And she was beginning to do that transition thing I talked about earlier. So I left, after my weekend stay. I went back home. And when I left and I went back home, the very next day, my grandmother passed. So I had to get another flight out because in my mother's side of the family is Muslim. So they have 24 hours to bury their people. So when I left, my grandmother passed. And I had to catch another flight to go back to help my mom with the funeral arrangements and everything else. And I'll tell you what I did. I went there. We did the religious ceremony. We buried my grandmother. And at her gravesite, I took a little container. It was actually those little plastic boxes that hold baby food, because we had some containers at the house. I don't know if it was for somebody's kid or if it was for my grandmother, but we had some containers there, and I washed one out and cleaned it out. And I just put dirt from her gravesite in this plastic box. I don't know why. I just felt the need to do that. I just felt this would be, in a way, me keeping a part of her with me because she's gone. And I still have that box with me. In fact, it's at my center. I don't know why. I just felt the need to do it. After she passed, I knew she was going to come and reach out to me to tell me what life was like on the other side, because that was the thing. We had always said that to each other, that when we passed, we would reach out to each other and give us an idea of what's to come. And I remember I was standing, we had just buried her, and I was standing in my mother's house. We were by the kitchen. They had a little corridor, and I was standing there talking to my mother about something. And I just kind of, my eyes glazed over and I just kind of stared off. And my mom was like, "What's going on with you?" And I was just like this. I was like, "Nan's here." Because I saw it clear as day. It's like, I don't know. I just had drifted off for a moment in conversation with my mom. And I was immediately in this room where she was sitting down, and there were these really tall people around her, and they were talking to her, and she was listening very intently to what they were saying. And she noticed me there, and she said to me, "Not now, babe. Not now. They're doing my life review with me." And I said, "Okay." And then immediately I was pulled back out of that situation, and then pulled back into the real life that we are in here now, the earth realm that we are in. And it was so sudden and so quick that I was shocked. So I told my mom what I saw, and my mom was relieved, because she knew that my grandmother was going to communicate with me. And once she did, she realized she made it. She's on the other side and she's good. My grandmother also reached out to my son, Joshua. In his dream, he said Nan came to him and took him to Disney World. Now, that's a special message, because my grandmother didn't have a lot of money, but she had a big heart. And I know if my grandmother had the money, she would have loved to take each of the kids, the grandkids, the great grandkids, to do something special, like to go to Disney World. So Joshua told me, he was little, and he told me that Nan took him to Disney World. And while he was at Disney World with her, he looked at her and she was shivering. And he asked her, "What's wrong?" And she said, "Nothing. I'm just cold. I'm cold." And he offered to give her his sweater that he was wearing. And then he woke up. I talk about this because I want you to know, as a medium, that I believe in life after death. I believe that we go to a different place, and I believe it's a safe place and it's a good place. And I believe that we all walk down the same road. It doesn't differ. And I believe that the loved ones that cross over to the other side also have a way of reaching out to us, if only we allow ourselves to be open to that process. I've had my grandmother, my aunt, my other aunt, and my uncles pass, and they have each reached out to me and given me not just messages for myself, but validation to let me know that they are real. When my uncle Abby passed, I had told my mother that he was going to reach out to her and to let her know that he was okay. I didn't have a very strong relationship with my uncle Abby, but he was one of my favorite people, because he was a very strong philosopher and, kind of geek. So we used to have those kind of geeky conversations in the car when he was driving me around when I was in college. And I appreciated him for that. And we used to go bowling together. But I was so surprised when he came to me in my dreams after he passed, because I hadn't seen him for years. And he came to me in my dreams, and we were driving in a car, and he told me that he is well, everything is fine, because he was the first person to go. So that broke my grandmother's heart. And out of that family, he was the first person to pass on. He had kidney problems. And he told me to tell the family he is fine, but he was very mad with a certain family member that I will not name on here. I know who the family member is. And he told me he was very mad with this family member because they were doing bad things and they were jeopardizing their life and they needed to be better. He had said that this person was acting crazily and they were going to put themselves in jeopardy by getting a certain kind of disease if they continued along this path. And I remember contacting that family member right after that dream and telling them, and the family member acting like they didn't know what I was talking about. And that made me feel some type of way because I was like, well, I guess I'm wrong. I guess I'm just imagining things, right? Come to find out, months later, news broke within that family that that person was indeed doing terrible things. And they were, in fact, at risk for that certain disease that I was told they were going to have. And they remembered me when all that blew up. They remembered me and they contacted me and said, you told me this. And I said, well, not me. Uncle Abby did. Right? And I still feel my Uncle Abby around from time to time. I feel like he's one of those powerful people that will just continuously be a part of my development and my life and my growing because he's very much into the things that I'm into. When my aunt died, she was somebody who babysat me most of my life. So she was kind of like a second mom to me. And when she passed away, I remember I had such a headache. Such a headache. It was right here in the middle of my head. It was like this constant noise that just would not stop. And I was so like exhausted by this constant noise in my head. And I did not relate it to my aunt passing. I just thought I was stressed out because I was crying all the time because that was one woman I really, truly loved. So when she passed away, I was crying all the time. And then I remember this buzzing in my head was getting louder and louder and louder. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm going to have like a nightmare. I'm going to like something bad is going to happen to me because this is just really bad. And then one day I just finally decided like, I can't take this anymore. So I decided to finally sit down and meditate and be like, what is this buzzing sound? And I kid you not, the minute I sat down to meditate and I closed my physical eyes and opened my spirit eyes, there was my aunt right there. And the first thing she said to me was, oh, thank God. I've been trying to get your attention for days now. And I said, you were that buzzing noise? And she said, yeah, I've been trying to call you through this tube and you haven't heard me. And now you can hear me. And I wanted to tell you that I did not have any pain when I passed. And I made it to the other side, like I told you I would do. And I was like, dang, I forgot about that, right? Because I make all of these promises with all these people. And in fact, if you know me, I'm making this promise to you. If you go before me, contact me. I want to know. Because in just me listening to all these people who have passed on the other side, can I tell you guys something? They all have the same stories. When you pass to the other side, a loved one comes to get you so you don't feel alone, you don't feel scared. There is a big tunnel that opens up full of white light that makes you feel safe, that makes you feel loved. And as you're walking through this tunnel of white light, it lights up. The tunnel lights up with memories from your life, and there's no one judging you. You actually are the one that judges yourself. You're the judge. You're the jury. As you walk through the tunnel, you're looking at your life, you're reflecting on your life, and you're thinking about things. Oh, I could have been a better person there. Oh, I could have made time for that person there. Oh, I was too hooked on making money. I was too hooked on superficial things. I could have relaxed more, worked less, enjoyed living at home more. It's the review that you give yourself about your own life. And then when you come out the other side on the tunnel, you meet with the elders to talk about your life and what you felt and you learned and you discovered about yourself. And then you talk about them, you talk with them about where you want to go next. Where you want to go next. Do you want to go back to Earth? Do you want to take some time on this side? Do you want to be a spirit helper to other people? Do you want to reconnect with those that went before you and you haven't seen in a while and you wanted to just have a moment to say hello? And you have to understand this too. There's no time. So is it you're alive and you're dreaming somebody who passed on? Or is it they're alive and they're dreaming you who's passed on? Which is it? It's a dream within a dream within a dream. And that's why it feels so real when we dream. Are we in the dream? Or are we dreaming? So that's my talk for tonight. If you have any questions about death, dying in the beyond, near-death experiences, I'm happy to take your questions now. I do have my own personal NDE story that I will share, but I just wanted to give it a moment to open it up to the floor to see if anybody had any questions or their own stories about death, dying, and the beyond. Welcome in, everyone. This is the Heart to Heart show. And tonight we're talking about echoes from the afterlife. Leanne said, very interesting. Thank you for explaining that process of it all. You're very, very welcome. My near-death experience happened in 2020. It was before we found out about COVID, because we didn't really find out about COVID until February, and then we went into lockdown around March. Well, in January, I had what was supposed to be a small procedure, surgical procedure done. I had a health issue, and my doctors felt that it would have been a good idea to have surgery to handle this health issue that was plaguing me since my 20s. So as it was explained to me, I was supposed to go in. It was going to be a 20 to 30 minute surgery. I would be taken back to heal, and then I'd be walking out the door. I was so confident that was what was going to happen that I had scheduled a class that night to teach and a class the very next day to be in. I really thought that's what was going to happen. And that's not what happened, because the surgery, something went wrong. I don't know if they cut an artery or cut a vein or something, but I bled out. I bled a lot. They said I lost a lot of blood. And I don't remember any of it, of course. But when I woke up in the post-op room, the room they take you to after you had surgery, I was groggy and I was out of it. And I've had surgeries before, right? I've had kids. I've had, a surgery because I had something on my liver. I've had my gallbladder taken out. So I've had surgeries before. So waking up and feeling as groggy as I did, that was strange to me because I know like when I wake up, I'll feel out of it, but pretty coherent. When I woke up in this post-op room, there was 2 nurses in there and I was trying to talk, but I couldn't find the words. And I remember I said some things to them. My boyfriend was in the waiting room waiting for me. But I remember saying to them, I need to see him right now. I need to see him right now. And they were like, oh, he'll see you in a bit. And I said, no, I need to see him right now because I was feeling very, very sleepy. And I remember thinking to myself, if I close my eyes, I'm not waking back up again. I remember thinking that because I was just so tired. And they weren't listening to me. They weren't getting my boyfriend. And I said, you know what? Screw it. I closed my eyes. And when I closed my eyes, I was immediately transported to a place that I'm going to talk about. The best way I could describe this place, I used to go to Queens a lot when I was in my 20s. One of my best friends, my older friends that I used to hang out with all the time, lived in Queens, New York. And there's a part of Queens where they have the trains that go above the city. So you have the shops, the busy streets, and then these trains are on these platforms that go above. And I remember I was standing in like a tunnel like that, because when you're standing on the street underneath the trains, you could feel like you're in a tunnel. And I remember I was standing on this street that seemed to be like in Queens. But the one thing I noticed was there was nobody there. It was quiet, which is weird if you're in New York. But I remember about a mile away, I saw a bright light. And I saw like about 50 to 52 people standing there, and they were cheering me on. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm dead. Because there's nobody here. There's a lot of people over there, and there's the white light, which I already know what that is. And those people, even though I couldn't see them because they were a mile away, I could already know who they were. They were people that I had worked with, my clients who had passed, family members who had passed, friends who I didn't even know passed, that had passed, and they were all cheering me on. And I remember thinking, I got to walk there. But also the other thing that I noticed about me being passed on was that it was very quiet. Now that's important because as a medium, I always hear things. Thank you. I always hear things. I don't ever get quiet. Oh my gosh, who sent this? Thank you so much. I love this gift. I just got a gift on Meet Me. Thank you, Something. And that's so sweet because she's on holiday. I remember the silence of it all because I said to myself, I must be dead because I've never in my life been anywhere on earth where it's been this silent. It was peaceful. And I remember seeing the people and the white light, and I was supposed to walk to the people and walk to the white light. But immediately when I was thinking to take one step forward, guess who showed up? My grandmother. And she stood in front of me and she just put her hand out and she said, no, baby, it's not your time. And I remember crying because it was so peaceful here. I could hear a pin drop and it was so quiet. And I felt so much love. And I just wanted to stay. And I wanted to go meet those people that were clearly cheering me on and telling me what a good job I did and how proud they were of me. I just wanted to be with those people. But she would not let me take another step. She said, "This is a mistake. You're going to survive. You still have a lot of work to do." And with that, I woke up. I woke up in the post-op room, but there weren't the two nurses in there anymore. The whole room was filled with doctors and nurses, and I woke up to a doctor shaking my shoulder very, very violently, screaming at me, "Uma, wake up. Uma, wake up. Uma, wake up." And I said, "I'm awake. I'm awake." And there was machines going off and beepers, and it was a lot of chaos in the room. I don't know why. I don't know why. I was so confused. And they said that for about a minute, my heart rate had dropped down to something ridiculous, like 20 beats per minute or something like that. And I had gone ice cold. And I don't remember any of that. I just remember the other side, being there with my grandmother and it being so peaceful and quiet. And that I wanted to stay. And then I felt so much shame because I'm a mother, right? How could I want to stay when I have two sweet boys to take care of? How could I? Who does that? So there was that shame that came in. And you know, when all of that happened, I didn't think to say anything to anybody because who would believe me, right? This is all in my mind. I'm making this up. But you know what's funny? Spirit has a way of validating things that you need to know about. When I finally got to see my boyfriend, he came in and he looked pale. And he said to me, "Don't ever do that again." And I laughed because I thought he meant the scare. And I said, "My bad." And he said, "No, don't ever leave your body again." And I got ice cold. And I said, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "I was in the waiting room and I watched you open the door and walk out of here." He said, "Uma, you walked out of here." And he said, "I was terrified." And I think they brought him back there to me. And I think he said he saw everything that was going on with everybody in there. And he said he put his hands on my feet and he channeled Reiki to me to help. But the thing is like, I was so surprised that he saw it because it validated where I've been and what I felt, right? Because it felt very real. But if he didn't tell me what he told me, I would have just thought, oh, it was my made up mind. I dreamt it, right? That's what we do. We tend to discredit the things we feel or discredit the things that we know. But the truth is, we know things. These things are real. And we need to start taking them more seriously. I'm going to end with this because it's 10:10. And what was funny was when it was time for me to start, thank you. When it was time for me to start, it was like at 9/11, which is my birthday backwards, January 19th. Thank you. So 10:10 is a good time for me to end this. I'm going to tell you this. You need to listen. The people that are on the other side are our loved ones, and they love us and they want to help us because this world is going crazy. Fear is running rampant, and you cannot allow yourself to get mixed up in all of it. We need to stick together. We belong to the same human race. We started together and we will end together. And they can help us. They can help us to remember that we belong to this human race and we belong to each other. So thank you for listening. I'm sorry I didn't have a guest tonight for the Heart to Heart show, Echoes from the Afterlife. I hope that you found my stories interesting enough to hit that like button, to leave a comment or two, if you're on Meet Me, to drop some gifts, and to just show up for me, show up for yourself, show up for everyone that you love. Bien said, I believe when I see my past loved ones, I see them as visiting me from the other side. Love never dies. That's such a beautiful, beautiful truth. Love never dies. So I'm going to end my YouTube show. I'm going to stay on Meet Me, open up the box. If anybody's still here, still wanting to hang out, come through, come talk to me a little bit, and let's talk about our near-death experiences and what we have learned. The biggest thing I've learned is to live my life with purpose. And I've dedicated my whole life to helping people reach their purpose. I know people look at me and say, oh, she teaches tarot classes and Reiki classes, and she gives people readings and healings. But the truth is, I have one main intent, and that's to get people to realize they have a life. And once you have a life, you have a purpose. And the most important thing is to get connected to whatever that purpose is. That's the most important thing. It's not getting the cars or the women or the men or the marriage or the lottery, right? It's about what could you be in life? How could you show up with purpose? How can you live with purpose? How can you be of service to others? That's the kind of conversations I'm interested in having and the kind of life I'm interested in living, you know? So thank you guys for joining me here on YouTube. I hope that you enjoyed this show. Please feel free to hit me in the comments if you're watching this from the recording and let me know what you thought about this show. Bien, come on back over to the other side. Thanks, guys.